I'm Chad from Team Forge, and this is LSP Talks, where I use the method and materials of LEGO Serious Play to have rich conversations with interesting people. I'm here today with Dr. Lisa Bennett, who's a scholar of Old Norse and Anglo-Saxon literature and culture, and so we're going to talk about the Viking Age today. So today, the question that I'm setting is build me a model that represents the Viking Age, or what the Viking Age means to you. You can see that Lisa's in her beautiful Viking garb, dressed up as a Viking woman today, and I did my hair just for the occasion as well. So we're going to build models that represent what the Viking Age means to us. Okay, go.
Thanks.
Can I get ahead? Thank you.
What I would really like are a couple more pieces like this.
Yeah. There you go. That's two.
Thank you.
Now, the deal here is that Lisa is a scholar of Viking literature. She really knows the Viking Age very well. I'm a complete non-expert. I've seen all of the seasons of Vikings twice. That's the extent of my expertise. So we have a nice contrast between expert and non-expert. One of the good things that LEGO Serious Play does is brings together people with different backgrounds, different experiences, and very different perspectives. So it doesn't matter that Lisa's an enormous expert in Vikings and that I'm not, because we can still have a conversation and share our perspectives with each other through LEGO Serious Play. So that's one of the benefits of it. That's the best sound in the world, by the way. That one. Maybe not to parents, but to me it is. Are you likely to need any of these?
No.
Okay. So I can take them all. Mwahaha. So what we're doing here is using Lego in a very metaphorical sense. So we're using it to symbolize what we're thinking. It helps bring our mental models to the surface, and then we're able to talk about them. And what I find happens is that I start building and I have a bit of an idea of what I'm going to build, but then I find more pieces and the model becomes richer and richer, and it begins to express a really much more complicated or complex mental model that helps me think through my ideas and then talk about it as well. So that's interesting. So I'm getting pretty close to done.
Me too. I just
you
have a
nearly done?
little bit more.
Cool.
And then I think we're good.
Okay, so now we've done the question, we've done build, and now we're going to share. So, would you like to go first, or do you want me to?
Sure, I'll go first.
Go for it. All right,
So-
tell me about your model.
This is a perfectly crafted Viking longship.
Does it float?
I bet it would float very well. So, and this is the ocean. Because to me, the Viking Age is not just about Vikings marauding, pillaging, conquering, but actually what made all that possible and what made the Viking Age so special was their ships. So they came up with a new design of ships that could go across oceans, but could also go inland on rivers because the hull was so shallow. So
At the same time, so it could go over oceans
Yeah.
and along shallower rivers.
And
Yeah.
I was also very conscious of making it perfectly symmetrical, not just
Yeah.
because I'm anal retentive, but because that was the feature that made it possible for Vikings to do hit and run raids. Unlike normal boats where you have to pull in to shore and then, pull them up on the beach or whatever, and then you'd have to back them out and turn them around and then get away. Vikings had perfectly symmetrical boats, so they could go in and come straight out again really quickly. So they could basically do hit and run raids all the time.
So it was highly mobile. It was like, they weren't stuck in one place.
No, but
Yeah.
they could get away really quickly, which is the important thing.
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
want to quickly go in, raid a monastery, and then get back in the ship and pull away,
Yep.
the other people would have to turn their boats around
And
to
wait for
follow
the
you.
tide and things like that. Yeah.
Well, they would still have to wait for the tides and stuff, but they also have oars. That's what these red things are.
Yeah, right.
So, so they were able to go further, find out, to discover new lands, and go inland with their ships and actually be able to move in quickly and move away quickly, which really changed the world.
And the oars meant that they could also sail or not sail. They could be mobile if there was no wind, right?
Yeah.
So it was more
So
versatile.
this is the sail. So it's
Yeah.
up at the moment. So really the oars should be stowed, but I didn't have that much room.
Because you do one or the other. You or sail,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
So if they're stuck, they could actually use the oars. And if you wanted to sort of propel yourself away from shore quickly, then you have the oars to get you away as well.
Okay,
So,
and this is your Viking dude?
yeah, that's the closest to a Viking. And you'll notice that he's not wearing a horned helmet.
Why is that? Tell me about
There
that.
were no horned helmets. That's an invention of the 19th century, particularly Wagner from his The Ring Cycle opera.
Okay, why would they have not worn horned helmets?
Well, if you think tactically, if you go into battle with two big things that you can hook an axe on, that's not really going to get you a win.
Not very practical, right?
No.
Yeah, okay. Boats are like, and ships are like central to Viking culture and things like that. Like practically, but do they have a symbolic meaning as well?
People would often be buried in ships as well. So lots of burial mounds on land had ships in them. The most famous is probably the Sutton Hoo ship burial, which is in England rather than Scandinavia. But people of prestigious roles like kings or earls would get buried in amazing ships. And if there wasn't a ship there, then they would often do a ship out of stone to signify the importance of ships as well.
Like the shape.
Yeah. And then on TV, they always show people floating away in ships and then having
burning.
bow and arrow, lighting it on fire.
Did that ever happen?
I don't know. Well, we don't have any evidence, but you would think probably not, because as you just mentioned before, there are tides. So you can imagine the ship going out, and then you light the corpse on fire, and then the tide turns and brings you a charred corpse back to land.
Oh, Mum, I didn't want to see you again like that.
It's not exactly the way that the person wants to be remembered.
Right.
So probably that's a Hollywood fiction.
But it's very romantic and it's a
cool.
great image,
Yeah.
right? And so here we have a bit of a thing about our ideas of Vikings and then what they can actually be as well.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
So they're a lot simpler than probably we would like them to be. But that's fine.
And we elaborate them in our imaginations a bit. Yeah. Cool. Okay, thank you. Well, here's my model, which is quite different. Not focused on ships much at all. This here represents, in a way, this castle piece represents the Viking culture. This is kind of the home of Vikings, right? They were agricultural people, so they raised cattle, as far as I know, and were farmers, essentially. And so this is kind of like their warrior culture at home. You can see here that there's a skull, so they kill people. And it was like their culture was built on the skulls of their enemies to some degree. But they were also about hierarchy, and this is the king. Okay, so Vikings had kings and kind of quite a social hierarchy like that. This here represents wealth. So they would go and raid, and they'd gather wealth and treasures and things like that, and then they'd bring it back home. So their homes would have rich hordes of treasures that they would bring back. But it also represents cultural wealth because they had stories and culture and all that sort of thing. So all of this is the home Viking culture, and this is a window through which they look onto the world. So it's like your frame. The way they saw the world was through the frame of their own culture and their own kind of literature and the way they lived. And then this is the rest of the world, because as with the boat and ships, they'd go out into the world. So the world was lush and green. And what the Vikings did was they went out to places that were previously unimagined, had never been travelled to before, quite far away. And so that's represented by these kind of stems coming out here, and also this sense of journey and going out and connection to very new places. And then what they would do is they'd go to places like Constantinople, as it was called in the days, or Dublin, for example, and they'd build new fortresses. So they would then, their culture, all of this culture would then be transplanted and would then mingle with the local cultures and things like that. So for me, it's partly about kind of journeying and all of that, but also about who they were at home and then who they were abroad and the change that they wrought on the world. And really, for me, the Vikings are very much about journey and adventure and innovation and change and doing new stuff, as well as that kind of cultural synthesis that came out of that. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Is that a hard distinction?
Yeah.
Yay! All right. Thanks very much for watching, and thank you very much to Lisa for building with me.
Thanks.
Cheers. Bye.